What's up, guys? Tim Little, Matt Allen. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin, and welcome back to another holiday buyer's guide video for you. Today's kind of two videos in one. We're covering two awesome finesse techniques. We're talking hover strolling and mid strolling.
Hover strolling and mid strolling are two of the fastest growing facets of bass fishing today. You may not have even heard of one or the other. Now, some guys are already very familiar with both, but these two techniques, they're finesse oriented. They really kicked off. They didn't begin with forward facing sonar by any means. You might have heard of the Demiki rig. It's been around a while. The concept has been here, but forward-facing sonar has allowed it to explode. Both of these methods. We're going to break it up. Tim is going to talk hover strolling. I'm going to talk mid-strolling. They're definitely cousins, but there's some differences between them. You want to kick us off?
Sure, we're talking ultra finesse fishing, and like Matt said, these are not new techniques. We did a video on it, I don't know, a few months ago, and just explaining, we've been doing this stuff for a decade.
Forever.
And now there's kind of like a name to it. Like Matt's talking about the Demiki rig, right? That's been around, that's been winning tournaments for years. But now with the advancements of forward-facing sonar, it's almost like it's being rebranded as like a newer technique coming from over from Japan. Same thing with hover strolling. You know, we used to have our custom hooks poured way back when on Clear Lake, ultra shallow, ultra finesse, you know, getting that bait to do that death spiral. We talked about that in that video. It's not newer techniques, but it seems like they're definitely gaining momentum, especially with forward-facing sonar. Being able to see those fish out there, ignoring all your other baits and being like, oh shoot, what can I throw at them now? These two techniques are what guys are throwing, and it's because they work. So hover strolling, so what is it? Basically, there's two ways to really fish this bait, right? There's, or rig this bait, I should say. There's taking your favorite 90-degree jig hook, putting it in your bait, and then rigging it forward face with...
You want to do it?
Yeah,
I could hold one and show them.
Rigging the face, you know, forward weight. You're taking a nail weight and putting it into the head of the bait. So basically, you're taking a weightless bait and adding a little bit of weight to it, and you're fishing it above that fish you're seeing. You're shaking it, and you're kind of letting that thing slowly fall as you're shaking it. The other way is to rig it with a pre-weighted hook. Core Tackle or Gambler, they both have weighted hooks. This is what Matt and I have been having made for us for
a long time, 10 or 15 years.
Many years. And again, the secret in that is getting that bait to fall ultra slow and getting it to do the death spiral. When you take your favorite soft plastic, like a 4-inch Yamamoto Senko, this bait already has a ton of weight to it, right? It'll fall subtly by itself. But when you take a little 90-degree hook, that's that Ryugi, and then you take a 1/96th or a 1/32nd nail weight and put it right in the head of that Senko, and you throw that up to your favorite dock or your favorite laydown, that bait, when rigged correctly, is going to do like this big spiraling death spiral. It's going to fall ultra slow. So it's an ultra realistic, ultra finesse technique, and it gets those fish to eat when a lot of other baits won't. So let's talk about rigging. I'll kind of show you real quick. I breezed through some of the gear real quick, but I just want to show you kind of how to rig.
Jump in for a second before you do it. So this is a buyer's guide. You guys have been following these videos every single day, but today is a little different because these topics are newer to the masses. We're doing a little teaching with the buyer's guide so you understand what the baits are for, because you need to understand both of these are gaining a ton of momentum. If you haven't tried them or you haven't heard about them, you're going to walk into the shop soon and see this stuff, if not already. It is definitely growing. Now, like all the buyer's guides, in the video description, we're going to link all the different baits, the heads, the gear, all of that for you, as long as it will fit, because it's sort of 2-in-1. So
Yeah.
maybe some of the rods aren't going to make it, but we're going to try to get it all in there. The concept here is to simplify it for you and to make it easy for you to get the items that you want, or for your loved ones to shop for you for the holidays. So below the video in the description will be links to every one of these items, our favorite sizes, our favorite colors, all of those different things. But this one's a little different, where we're leading with a little bit of teaching, and now Tim's gonna go into the baits themselves.
You want me to rig one or no?
Go. Can you rig and talk? Can you walk and chew?
I can walk and chew. So the key to rigging this thing is getting or having a 90-degree line tie. Basically, you want your line coming out the top of the bait. Okay, so take your favorite 90-degree jig hook, and you're gonna rig this about 1/4 of an inch back behind the face. That's gonna allow you room to put your nail weight in there. You're gonna come through, you're gonna pop this thing out, slide this thing down into it, and then boom, you're going to have a rigged bait. Now you take your favorite nail weight. I like the reins. The reason I like the reins is you can get it all the way down to 1/96 of an ounce, a super lightweight bait. Now you tie this on your 4, 5, 6 pound test rigged on a spinning rod, and you can fish this thing around a lot of cover, and it's non-intrusive. So I just rigged one for you. The other way to rig them, like I said, there's those weighted hooks. You rig them the same way, about 1/4 of an inch back from the face of the bait, come in the top, pop it through, and then pull the face up and over that pointed lead, and you'll be rigged up just like this little guy right here. Okay, so I kind of explained the technique. It's a really patient technique, if you will. You know, you can, like I said, we've been doing this for a decade. We didn't have forward-facing sonar, so what we would do, we'd pull up to our favorite dock, or we'd pull up to our floating campsite,
places where we caught them before,
and we would throw that thing out there, and we just let it fall. We're watching it on semi-taut line, and that thing is just falling. It's hovering down. Sometimes it'd be down 15, 20, 25 feet, and then all of a sudden you'd see that doop, you'd reel down and set, and it's a 3, 4 pound spotted bass. So really cool technique when other baits won't work. Now the baits themselves are really important. So we talked about the hooks, we talked about the weights. So you have the gear, now the baits. Two of my favorite, I already talked about that 4-inch Yamamoto Senko, natural shad. If you guys are on fisheries that have shad, you need this bait. I don't care what, you have to have this color, okay? Natural shad. Natural shad. One more time. Natural shad. They will eat it, okay? The other bait, this got discontinued a long time ago, and we were bummed.
Super
This
bummed.
has caught more big fish on light line for us than all these other baits combined. The reason being, this is the Robo Worm Sculpin. If you look at this bait, it's almost like an eel. It's got a long dorsal fin that goes the whole length of the bait. So when you rig this properly with your hook, you can put a little turn in it, and it gets a giant death spiral. Why is that important? When you're up pre-spawn, post-spawn, or maybe you're up middle of the summer and you see those fish, you ever pull up to a dock and just see the fish suspended up underneath the dock or in the shade line? You throw this bait out there and let it do its thing. It just does this big death spiral, and you're holding it, you're watching it. All of a sudden you see those fish just
just sink out,
sink down. Like, oh, here we go, doop, and the fight is on. Again, we're throwing ultralight line, but it's a bait. I've never seen anything like it. It's sight fishing when you're not bed fishing, if that makes any sense. When you're up and you see cruisers and you lead fish with with this setup, when that bait falls, if it does the death spiral or not, when it falls, it's just so non-intrusive. Like the fish just, I've seen them swim 50 feet over to look at it. You do one little shake and they just suck it in. Again, it's nothing new. What's new about it is how they're applying it to the fish they're seeing on forward facing. I point to the front of the bow. Forward facing. When you can see those fish suspended in a treetop or suspended on a dock piling. You might not be visually seeing them, but you're seeing them with your electronics. This technique applies. So we talked about the sculpin and why it's special.
Can I add one more thing?
Sure.
Because you mentioned the sculpin being discontinued. You forgot the all-important part where
they brought it back.
They brought it back.
Yeah.
And it is legit.
Yeah, they brought it back. Okay, a couple other baits that we really like to throw. You might have seen the Bassmaster Classic one on this bait right here. That's the jerk shads. What makes this bait so special, it's Elastec. It's also high float, so that slows that fall. You can almost get this thing neutrally buoyant in the water column. So if you are, maybe you're not doing that death spiral, but maybe you're just kind of shaking that bait up above that fish as it's falling, this falls at such a slow rate, it can almost be a floater. That's what makes that one special. And then the little, that's that Fluke Junior, Super Fluke Junior, Zoom. A great alternative. It doesn't float as high as this one, so it falls a little bit faster. If you're fishing spotted bass down in that 15-20 foot range, you can go with that shad profile and still do that hover strolling technique. Now, it's important to understand, I might have breezed through it when I was talking about it earlier, I like to get that death spiral. That is that sign of a dying bait fish. It just really keys in those fish into, I'm gonna eat you, right? There is the other way to fish this bait, and it's to cast it out. You're visually looking at those fish on your forward facing, and you're basically just fishing it back to the boat. You're keeping it
like
high.
Crazy subtle shape.
You're keeping it high in the water column. He's gonna talk about lower in the water column in just a second, but you're keeping it high in the water column. So again, springtime, fish are up shallow. They're up there in the shallows on laydowns, whatever it may be, dock pilings. That's where this bait really comes into play. And then offshore, fall, winter time, as those fish start schooling up offshore on bait fish, a lot of times you can throw to that those fish maybe showing themselves, they're boiling. They might not be committing to top water. You can get this bait down there in that 5 to 8 foot range, shaking it subtly, and again, it's not intrusive, and they just eat it. Last but not least, I don't think anybody's really talked about this. Throwing the little craw baits on the little hover rig. It's again, clear water, non-intrusive. So is big smallmouth. If you're a guy that likes to throw a Ned rig, the little TRD craws, you put that on like the core tackle or the little gambler, weighted head, and throw this thing out there. Again, it's just going to glide to bottom, a lot like a tube. You guys, if you ever rigged a tube correctly, you get that real big spiral. Same type of thing, just downsized and lighter. That bait is lights out. Should I talk about rods and reels, or you want to?
Let's do rods and reels at the end.
Okay.
Shifting gears here. So hover strolling is like ultra finesse. So I mean, Tim's talking a 190 what?
Sixth.
A 196th ounce. For a guy that wants to wind a spinnerbait, that's hard to hear, right? There's a whole nother deal here. Mid-strolling. Mid-strolling, very similar concept, but much easier for you to stay connected to the baits, easier to cover more water if you want to. Again, there's multiple applications for this thing. Now, one thing I want to add, we're talking a lot about forward-facing sonar, about live imaging. A lot of guys are going to glaze over when they hear that. That's not for me. That's cool. You should not glaze over these two styles of fishing. We were doing that more than a decade before anybody thought of, well, maybe people thought of it. We sure didn't. Before live was even a thought. Mid-strolling. You can do this over the top of fish on live, but you can also just go to the favorite places that you throw everything else. Throw that thing out there and work it effectively. You can also, if you've got a unit, 2D sonar, the traditional Demiki rigging, see a fish on the sonar, drop that guy down there, stop it above them, shake it, and get those fish to rise up to that thing. So the Demiki rig really is the beginning of this category, whether somebody wants to say that or not. This has been around a long time. It is crazy deadly. It has won so many fall and winter tournaments without live. Now that there is live, the thing is just booming, right? But the Demiki rig is so effective. The concept here with mid-strolling is we are essentially swim bait fishing without the tail. What I mean is that a Kitech, you're winding that thing through the water, steady retrieve. The bait's doing its thing and that tail is back there kicking. Bass are getting conditioned. I'm not saying don't throw a swim bait. My goodness, we throw swim baits. But what I'm saying is they're getting conditioned. They're more leery of that than they used to be. All of these baits, they're straight tails or fork tails. The concept is the same. Now, again, we can fish these over their head or right down near bottom. But regardless, we're fishing this by throwing it out, letting it fall, whether that's to bottom and then we reel it up a little, or throwing it out, counting it down, or watching a live unit and stopping it 27 feet. Regardless, you throw it out, you stop it, and then you just begin shaking the rod while you reel. Okay, super subtle shake and vibration. When rigged properly, what's going to happen is instead of your Kitech coming through the water with a tail kick, this is coming through the water while rocking side to side. But it is catching those same fish, and this they have not seen. They don't see it coming. They're not checking whether or not it's real. They are simply crushing it. It works. So mid-strolling, again, we can go all the way to a straight Demiki rig. And you can take, I mean, we're acting like you can't do all of it with a Demiki rig. Right. You can. You can take the same Demiki rig you already own, see them on your 2D, drop it down, hold it over them, work it, wait, and let those fish come up and get it. You can also throw this out on live, count it down, work it above fish where you're shaking and that thing's rocking, coming through the water, and those fish come up and get it. We can also just throw it out blind, let it go to bottom, reel it up a couple times real quick to get 2, 3, 4, 5 feet off the bottom, and then just start that slow wind, but with the shake. It works. Now there are some other great baits, great heads. We've got that Demiki head. The key there is that 90-degree line tie. That is a major, major factor with one exception. Outside of that Demiki head, two other heads that I've had a bunch of success with. The Dirty Jigs Guppy head. 90-degree line tie. Looks familiar. I'll show you that on some baits here in a second. But the other one, a great one, is just a darter head. You just get you like a 3/16 ounce darter head. But the difference here is I'm talking an 1/8 ounce guppy or an 1/8 ounce Demiki or a 3/16 up to, on the high end, a 3/8. Okay, but I'm more connected to my bait, especially with like a 3/8. You're way more connected. You can throw it way farther. You can get to deeper water more quickly. You can work it faster. So this is more finessey. This is a little more power, but I mean, power is a stretch. It's still finesse, it is. But let me walk you through a couple of these baits. So we've got the Demiki, that 3-inch armor shad. That's your original. Along that same sort of profile, we've got from Yamamoto, we've got the scope shad, which is going to look like this. It is no mistake that it's also that same natural shad color. I've got it rigged just on a 3/16 ounce darter. It is super effective. When you're shaking that thing and it's rocking, those fish just come up and get it. Another one is going to be from Duo Realis, the 3-inch finder shad. I've got that one rigged up on an, actually, it's not an 1/8 ounce. What is that?
Looks like a quarter.
Quarter? Yeah. 1/4 ounce, but a 1/0 hook on that little 3-inch. This little bait is cool because you got a couple little side fins, and I don't know if you can make out that tail or not, but as you're shaking that thing, that tail is whipping. You're getting a little bit of extra action out of that one. And then hands down, my personal #1 in the smaller sizes is going to be the Hog Farmer Spunk Shad. Same thing that we put on the back of a chatterbait, but in the 3.5. Like this guy, the Ghost Minnow 3.5 on a guppy head.
Looks good.
When you're shaking it, it's doing a full body rock coming through the water, and those fish hammer it. Now, that's the finessier end of this thing. You can also go to the power end of this thing, where it's a heavier head, heavier hook, bigger profiles, you know, Tennessee River, ledge fishing, largemouth fisheries, where you've got a lot of good quality fish, and you're not trying to catch them on 4, 5, 6 pound fluoro, right? We're trying to get these fish on 12 or 15 pound line, braid to leader. This was super effective for us this year. This is our Tactical Bassin screwed up swim bait head. Now, it is a 30-degree line tie, not 100% ideal for the technique, except that I'm throwing it in a 3/8 ounce and we're sending this thing. So it's not like we're fishing this, you know, 10 to 60 feet from the boat, looking at our jig head on live sonar. I'm talking sending it as far as you can, 15, 20, 25, 30 feet of water, letting that thing go down, then reeling it up and working it so that line tie angle doesn't matter when we're making those bomber casts. The 30-degree actually makes it more unstable and more apt to rock as it's coming through the water. Two baits for those larger profiles. The one I've done the best with is the Crush City Freeloader. That freeloader, pointed tail, but it's flat-sided. So when it's rocking, I mean, there's a lot of commotion there. It's very evident that it is rocking. And I think when I threw this thing for the first time, I think I went 2 casts before I got the first bite on it. It was like instant success, instant confidence, and I just blasted them from there. The other one is from Depths. That's the Sakamata Shad. The Sakamata Shad globally is probably the #1 mid-strolling bait. Comes in a bunch of sizes. The problem with the Sakamata Shad, like a lot of Depths baits, you can't get them. If they're in stock though, get them. But they can be really hard to get. It's a fluke type profile, but it's got these little fins on the face, and they just help that thing rock and roll, and it just maintains that really good action. Again, we're targeting swim bait or paddle tail type fish, but with a completely different profile, completely different movement. And I will say, as we'll probably jump into rods now, you can go first, but spinning, at least for me, spinning is everything for this technique. It is much harder to do on a bait caster. It is much easier to work it with your wrist with spinning gear than it is to work it with your forearm with casting gear.
Yeah, I do this on spinning rods. As you can tell, guys, 2 finesse techniques: higher in the water column, lower in the water column. But it's just they're 2 different presentations. One I understand, one I'm still trying to understand why a bait going side to side as you're shaking it, why that convinces those fish to eat.
Boy, but does it.
But they do. It works. I don't know if it's like a frantic, I don't know what it is, but it works. Gear for this, like Matt said, spinning rods. And for me, long spinning rods, because I'm throwing ultra lightweight stuff. Again, 1/32 of an ounce, 1/64, 1/96, really lightweight deals. So I want a 7.4 to 7.6 light rod. I want castability. I want to be able to send this thing, and then as I'm letting it fall, I'm just watching that line paired up with either 4-pound fluorocarbon, 5-pound fluorocarbon. The heaviest I do is 6-pound. If I can get away with it, I will go braid to leader. Again, braid's more sensitive. With that smooth braid, it's smaller diameter, and I can get a lot farther casts out of a 6 or an 8-pound braid, because it's only like a 2-pound diameter, you know, equivalent to like fluorocarbon or monofilament. So longer castability, more sensitivity. But again, I'm just watching that fall if I'm doing that spiral technique or I'm shaking. If you're a guy that wants to go and do more of the shaking technique like Matt's going to talk about, you're going to go with a little bit shorter rod. For me, it's all about that castability. And then when you do hook that fish on 4 or 5-pound test, having that longer rod just plays those fish a little bit better. This is that Zodius. This is the 7.6 light. So a 7'6" light power rod. And then for you ultra fancy guys, this guy right here. This is
we say you fancy guys. It's we fancy guys.
We fancy guys. The NRX Plus 901. So again, a 7'6" rod, a 1 power rod. This is a hair jig rod, but it works great for this technique as well. Paired up with either an Xsense or a Stella, you can't go wrong with either. That's just an ultra finesse it's a rod
dream
reel combo. Again, the drag system on the Stella is about the best you can get. So when you're fighting these big 5-6 pound smallmouth on 4 pound tests, you need a good drag. But again, totally depends on how you want to set up your baits. If you want to do that shaken or if you want to do that death spiral, totally depends on which bait you go with. And we'll link all of these down below in the video description for you.
Now, rods for this version, where I'm using a little bit heavier heads, particularly on the bigger baits. So on the freeloader, on the Sakamata Shad, Daiwa Steez, again, it's a high-end combo. The specific model I've been using is the One. That's a 7.6 mml. So medium light. Kind of a funny rating. But it's got some tip to it. But it's got enough backbone that I'm still able to set that bigger 3/8 ounce head, full size swim bait hook, literally the same thing that I would have in like a 4/8 Kitech. I'm able to set that, but I'm going spinning tackle because it is much easier for me to work this with my wrist than it is with a bait caster to use my whole arm. It's just so much easier to do as I'm working that bait.
And what you're not seeing as he's doing that rod tip is down there just reverberate, just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that's giving that bait that shimmy.
That wobble. And then for the smaller baits, a smaller rod just makes it easier to do. So from X Pride, trying to be reasonable, right? Bang for the buck, that mid-priced combo, that X Pride 6.8 medium. Not a medium light, just a straight medium. Again, I'm using heavier heads, right? A lot of 3/16, quarter ounce down to an 1/8. So I'm throwing braid to like 7 or 8 pound fluoro. And on the big stuff, I mean, I'm using 12 pound fluoro, 14 pound fluoro. You can get away with that. So that 6.8 medium is plenty where I'm able to work that thing really effectively. And when they eat it, I just lean back on them and I've got them. Two very unique techniques that are gaining tons of momentum with or without forward facing, with or without live. These are here to stay. They are growing. They've been very dominant in tournaments. They've been dominant in our own travel and fishing. They're very effective ways to catch them. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Keep in mind, these buyer's guides are continuing 7 days a week. I think we've got one tomorrow. That's another bait video. We'll be talking Ned rigs. And then after that, we start the rod and reel combo videos, the ones that we've been waiting for, and we'll build from budget all the way to ultra high end. Again, we appreciate you, and we'll see you tomorrow.